Okay, welcome back, everyone. I am pleased to be back with you for another Know-How Corner. And today I have Amy Cooper here. So, Amy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Amy Cooper. I am an assistant accounting professor at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I'm the accounting program director for the accounting program with the College of Business and Security Management. I'm the faculty advisor for our student accounting organization, which is Great Alaskan Accounting People, or GAP, that Donny has actually spoken to a couple years, and they love him. They were jealous that I got to do a podcast with you today. So yeah, I guess that's me in a quick nutshell.
Excellent, thank you. And the reason I was actually excited to interview Amy is that she did her dissertation on, and wait, I gotta read this because there's so much here. The interplay of firm size, job embeddedness, and job engagement on turnover intentions within public accounting firms.
It is a lot.
It was a lot, but I found your research really insightful because I think you kind of flipped the script on stuff. But we'll get there. So let's start first with what really inspired you to focus on turnover and retention in this topic for your dissertation.
Absolutely. So I actually started in public accounting. So I started at Arthur Andersen in the Seattle office. So had that big four accounting experience, and then moved to Alaska and worked for two different firms here, both very small firms, probably large for Alaska, or not large, but not tiny for Alaska, and where I did everything. I mean, at Arthur Andersen, very, very specific. At small firms, you do whatever you needed to do, whether it was payroll or a reviewed financial statement, and then the tax return for the business, and then the individual tax returns. And then I went into to teaching as an instructor, and then decided to go back and to get my doctorate in the very first class we had. And so I got my doctorate of business administration, and most of the people in that program were people who were working full time while also going back to get their doctorate. So they were taking full load of classes while also still in their full-time job. And it was people from all over. So it wasn't just academics, it was people who worked in tech firms, who worked in and like grocery firms, who worked in I mean, just it was across the board. One of them was a doctor, he was an anesthesiologist. And a really interesting mix of people. And one of our very first class, the director of the program said, what we want you to do is to find a problem and practice, and then we want you to apply the rigor and the academic literature to that practice and problem. And so I kind of thought about that for a couple of years, and then I got to the point where we had to really talk about what we wanted to do. And I've served on many different committees for the AICPA. I'm on council for the AICPA. I'm work a lot with my Alaska Society of CPAs, and retention has always been an issue. I mean, it's always been an issue in public accounting. And so I thought about retention and turnover. And then the reason size was maybe a different factor, but whenever you meet someone, if you go to these big conferences and you meet someone and they have public accounting experience, they will say, oh, I worked at a large regional firm, or I worked at a small firm. And that's just how we're used to like classifying. And so it's like, well, size has obviously been studied in other areas of organizational behavior. So what does size do for turnover intentions and public accounting? And then I was thinking of different constructs to kind of also look at what has predicted turnover intentions in the past. And someone directed me towards job embeddedness and then job engagement, because those hadn't been studied in public accounting. So trying to figure out what I also related to. And I really like the constructs of job embeddedness and job engagement. And the problem is retention. It's always been retention. You talk to people, they get their 2 years experience, 1 year experience, and they're out of public accounting. And then you have some obviously who stay and then retire from public accounting. But that's really why I chose the topic that I did, for various reasons.
That makes sense. Now you brought up two words there that one we hear a bunch. The engagement, employee engagement is always the way it's said, but the other one you brought up is job. You actually brought it up as well, job embeddedness. Can you
Mhm.
explain both of these terms for us so that we make sure we're all on the same?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, job embeddedness was a construct to predict turnover intentions. It was created in 2001 by Mitchell and al. And so they were looking at turnover intentions. And job embeddedness has two dimensions. So, on the job embeddedness and off the job embeddedness. And what it really looks at how connected, that's how I think of it, is how connected, or almost like a spider web, right? Like how many strands do you have that are kind of connecting you to where you are? And it's connection to your organization, but it's also connection to your community. So there's links, fit, and community. So for on the job, what are your links, your personal, I mean, your professional links on the job? What is your fit? So how do you as an individual fit? And there's different ways you can look at that. And then community is how you fit in the community of your professional organization. And then there's the community piece of it. So it really looks at not just professionally, how do you fit, or what are your connections in your firm, but also what are your connections in your community, and how does that play a role in keeping you at the firm. And then engagement. So job embeddedness is really interesting in that job embeddedness, and I think I said connections, but it's links, fit, and sacrifice. And we can talk about sacrifice later. Those are very specific. Engagement has been looked at in so many different
Mhm.
industries, has been looked at, and there's different definitions of engagement. And so when I went through engagement, I went through some of the different ones, and there's Con, and there's the one that Gallup uses. The one that I looked at was Schofele, and it really looks at, and it kind of made sense to me. It was also the one that had probably been used the most in the academic literature that I looked at. Um, and it looks at really what is your, like, it's this positive, fulfilling state of mind that is characterized by like vigor, dedication, and absorption. So, what is your level of energy with regards to your work? What is your level of involvement? So that's your dedication, like how you really get into it. And then absorption, I kind of think of absorption almost as like, when you get into that flow, like you're super concentrated, you're super engrossed, and all the world is revolving around you, but all you're focused on is your work. Um, and I liked the interplay of job embeddedness and job engagement, because embeddedness is something that you can't, like, you just don't go to a firm and you're embedded, right? You don't move to a community and you're embedded. Like, that takes time. That's a longer term concept. Whereas engagement, especially in public accounting, I mean, that can change from client to client. So you're looking at both the short term piece of it and the long term piece of really bringing an employee into your firm and what you believe in.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I like that mix between the shorter term, and you're
Mhm.
right, because there's one client you can work on, you're like, oh, this is really interesting. Let me do that. And then you go to the next engagement, which could be the next week, and you're
Yes.
like, oh,
Uh,
I switch jobs now. Like,
Right. Like, I do not like this. Like, this is not, maybe you just don't connect with the client, or maybe you don't like the work, or, it's not exciting to you, and you know that you have to do it, but it's not something that like really gets you excited, and you don't want to really like you'll do what you have to do, but it's not something that you become passionate about. Um, and I think that engagement in public accounting, and we can talk about this, but engagement in my work did not actually predict turnover intentions. And one of my thoughts when I was thinking about why is that, maybe it's the nature of what we do at public accounting, right? We don't have that opportunity to maybe get engaged, or maybe because we are flipping from client to client or industry to industry, depending on, size of firm. That could affect it, or also the nature of our deadlines and what we have to do, and how, maybe from January to April, it's really hard to have like a high level, or maybe you're super engaged and then you're not engaged, right? Because you're like, I've had 4 months of intense work. My engagement is just down right now. And my research didn't show that, but I think that that would be really interesting to why, would engagement look differently at private industry for accounting versus public accounting, just because the nature of the work is different.
what did you find? So what were the kind of key findings from your
Sure.
research?
So, I looked at size of firm and did size of firm predict job embeddedness or job engagement. And what I used for size of firm was AICPA's definition of size of firm. So small firm is 1 to 10, medium firm is 11 to 20 employees, professional employees, and then large is 21 plus. So that's what I used for size of firm. And size of firm did. So the larger the firm was, there were higher levels of job embeddedness, which is that's not what I was anticipating. And it did not, size of firm did not predict engagement. So there's no relationship between size and engagement, job engagement. And then job embeddedness was a predictor of turnover intentions with CPAs working in public accounting firms, but engagement was not a predictor of turnover intentions. So engagement really it ended up not, like size didn't predict it, and it didn't predict turnover intentions.
Oh, talk a little bit more about the size of firm. So what was kind of your original thought there? And you said it wasn't what you thought. So what
No,
do you kind of what flipped that?
I expected that going into this, I was like, oh, for sure, like employees, CPAs, professionals who work in public accounting firms, if they are in a smaller firm, they are more embedded and they are more engaged. Like I just knew, like I just knew in my head that that was what it was going to be, and that in larger firms it would not be. Like they wouldn't be as embedded or as engaged, and that was not the larger the firm, the higher the level of embeddedness.
Hmm. That's interesting. That would have been
Yeah.
my thought too.
And I think because I've thought about this a lot, when you look at a big firm, like and I'm just throwing out big four because that's what I think about. But if you've got a firm that is an international firm and it's got offices around the world, each of those offices though act kind of like their own. They have national policies, international policies that they're following. But for example, in Alaska, we have firms that are in Anchorage, and those are small offices. Right. Those could even be smaller than some of the local CPA firms, the regional CPA firms. Um, and maybe because they do allow where, okay, if you really find this one particular industry that you were really passionate about, you have that opportunity to really get into that, and you have that opportunity to find that one area that you're passionate about. Um, so I think there's a lot out there, I think, that you could explore as to why, if you were working at a larger firm, why you might be more embedded. And maybe
Mhm.
it could be that they maybe allow more work from home. This is totally speculation at this point. And so you are allowed to get more embedded in your community, so you can live where you want to live, but work for, an office not in your city. So perhaps that is a reason. And all of this was done during COVID. So, that could be, that could be a factor.
Right. But I think that makes it even more important because that's where I think we saw a lot. There probably was a higher risk of turnover, or if we believe the whole Great Resignation, everything there,
Right.
right?
Right.
So interesting to kind of be able to see that more.
Mhm,
The
mhm,
I was going to share with you because I don't know if you saw our research, the center's research on sorry, not staffing, advisory services. And in our advisory services research, we actually have a couple of data points that support your industry um, hypothesis
mhm.
there. So we found that there was a higher level of employee satisfaction. So not the same thing, but a higher ENPS
Mhm,
score for firms that had a moderate level of vertical specialization, so
mhm,
industry.
mhm,
We
mhm,
also saw it in some of the horizontal, but when it got too deep horizontal specialization, it actually detracted from it.
mhm,
So
mhm,
that was kind of interesting, but definitely the industry one that will make sense.
mhm.
Got data to help you there.
And you wonder, and this is again, my research didn't address it, but one of the things I've thought about, because I have small firm experience, you're doing so much, and because there's so many rules and principles, whether it's FASB or whether it's, tax code, all, and they change all the time. So maybe it's hard to really feel comfortable in that spot if you're working on all those different types of work that you never quite feel like you've mastered it. And I don't know if that has a role in, making you feel more engaged, but it's something I've thought about with this research.
No, I think so. What would be your recommendations to firms? And I don't know if it varies whether it's a smaller firm or a larger firm. Based on your research, what's your recommendation to firms?
If I were talking to a partner right now, what I would say is find out what really matters to each of your employees, because I think that that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about this research is that these constructs are very individualized. How I am embedded is going to be different than how you are embedded. What makes you embedded in your community, the things that you like about the community, what is your sacrifice? Like if you left your community, what are you sacrificing? What is your family sacrificing? That is very different than, I mean, it could be very different than what my sacrifice would be, or what makes me really excited about my community. And I think that if you can't understand that and just trying to do like this broad, here's what we're going to do for all employees, and we're going to do these activities because this is good for the community and you're all going to enjoy it, you're kind of missing out on what really works for your employees, and understanding what kind of work did they like to do. And if you were a smaller firm, the work that you have is the work that you have, right? I mean, you're a little bit tied in that, but if they really do enjoy a particular type of work, maybe most of that can be shifted, understanding that they're going to have to do tasks or they're going to work on clients that maybe doesn't, give them that same kind of vigor, or they don't get as absorbed in that work. But understanding what makes them tick, I think is what is really important. It can't be a one size fit all. And I think that's regardless of size, right? And we all have the power within that to figure out whether you're in academia and you're a program director, or you were in a small firm or a big firm or whatever, like figuring out what really works for your employees. And what can you do within your power and your limited resources, because we all have some type of constraint. Trying to understand what makes them tick is what I would focus on first. It's not a one size fits all. And that's what I really enjoyed about researching job embeddedness and job engagement, is that you've got to look to each employee.
No, my gut reaction, and actually it's not necessarily mine, but I know this is going to be a
Yep.
lot of partners, uh,
Right.
is that's a lot of work. You want me to
Yep.
individualize what I'm doing for every single employee that we've
Yeah.
got here.
And
Like,
that is an excellent point. And I don't think that it doesn't have to be this overwhelming like effort to make sure that every single employee, but managers at some point are going to have some evaluation with their employees, right? I mean, they're going to have there's going to be interaction. We work on teams in accounting. That's what we do. Regardless of the work we're doing, we work on teams. So understanding that, Amy likes to go do X, Y, and Z on a Friday afternoon for 2 hours. Like, it doesn't have to be like super comprehensive, but acknowledging that they enjoy doing that stuff and you want to support them. So it may seem like, okay, well, that seems like a lot to ask. As me of this partner, I've got 600 employees in this firm, but within each unit, there can be that can be done to make, because I think really what it comes down to is that you're being recognized for what you appreciate and what you enjoy. And that doesn't necessarily have to be something that only one person does, because it's so overwhelming and it would be so much work for me to know what makes 600 of my employees tick. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot, but I think that at a smaller unit level, I think that it can be done.
so I'm gonna rephrase what you said, which is basically it's not the partner's responsibility necessarily. It's the partner has to enable the whole tree, which we know accounting firms are not like standard trees.
Yes, no,
You work for different partners, you work for different managers, right? Depending upon
all
what,
the time, right?
but you really got to get it down to somebody that is overseeing the person below them
Yeah,
on their
yeah.
team, or the mentor or the coach, whoever it is, needs to take that time, and individualize
Mhm.
the way that they're working with that person.
And I recognize too that, if I am working at a small tax firm and it is March 10th, like there's only so much that can be like the work has to get done. And I think anyone who goes into this industry knows that. And if that is really what something does, somebody is can't get behind, then it may be at some point they do, there's a better fit for them somewhere else. But for those employees who really do kind of like that type of work and really get into that and want that kind of client work, yeah, there are going to be times where you can't do much to individualize it, but there are other times when you can, and you can recognize that. And it's flexibility, right? It's not saying, okay, well, so Amy wants to be here from 4 in the morning till 3 every day, regardless of the year, time of year. I'm not saying to do that. It's not that extreme, but just looking at all the different pieces that that make that individual excited about coming to work and excited about living in the community.
Hmm, makes sense. This actually makes me think about the importance of one-on-ones. I've been actually saying that a lot when I talk about hybrid work and remote work, that the concept of one-on-ones becomes very important because that is where, and I utilize this in my firm to really get that understanding of that person as an individual, both on at a pseudo semi-personal level, but also just kind of what are your challenges? Where can I help you? Like, where are you getting stuck? I think those kinds of things. But I want to pose this to you because I was doing an AACSB school visit and I was meeting with the people on the advisory board for this
Yep.
school. And one of them was a partner. I'm not going to say which firm they were from to spare the innocent, but we talked about this one-on-one because they were talking. They're saying, "Oh, it's so hard to do remote work," and this is funny because this was in a rural. The school is in a kind of a rural area, and I said, "Well, one-on-ones are really the thing," and he said, "Oh my God, that would take up so much time. How could I ever do that?" I was like, not do that.
Yeah. I did it. It was kind of it was fall of 2020, so it was COVID. And we were on campus, and my classes were on campus, but we were all masked, and we were one of the few colleges on that kind of came back to in person. But I mean, the desk had to be set up a certain way. They had to be clean. There were all these procedures in place. And I had a class of, I don't know, I think it was like 27 or 28. But I mid-semester, and I don't do this, especially with an in-person class, because I see them every week, but I actually had them meet with me over Zoom, each person for 15 minutes, because I just wanted to check in on them, right? And yes, it definitely it took time, but I think that I wasn't asking a lot of really hard questions. I don't need to know a lot about my students' personal lives if they want to share stuff with me, but I don't need to know that. That's not my role as their faculty. But I just wanted to make sure that they were doing okay. I just wanted them to have that one-on-one because we were all so segregated or, closed up. And yes, is it going to take time? Absolutely. But the benefit of taking, 15 or 30 minutes for a one-on-one, I think is definitely can outweigh the time that you've put in it.
Well, I think your research starts to prove that out.
Yeah.
So you're not just saying that that's what you think.
Yeah.
You've actually got some data that actually shows that.
There really is data that shows that.
Is there anything else in your research that we haven't talked about yet that you think is important for firms and firm
One
management?
of the things so initially I wanted to do qualitative. Like I was like, I am doing interviews. I am not a quantitative person. I know I'm accounting and I know I teach numbers, but I'm not like, I really wanted to focus on the interviews. And my committee, who were all accounting faculty, were really, I will be forever grateful to them because they were like, okay, all these constructs that you want to use, they they already have validated surveys. Like they have just use that. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that, but I did. And I'm very, very grateful. But one of the questions that I asked, and I was just trying to, here you go. It was the last question that I asked. So all the questions that were related to the construct. So my job embeddedness, job engagement, my control variables, which were job commitment, job satisfaction, and job alternatives. Those all had survey questions that had been validated and found reliable and used in multiple studies. But I asked a question at the end about different aspects of a firm, that aspects of their firm that they liked. And these were all tied into what about the different construct about job embeddedness or job status or job engagement. And so I just thought this was interesting. Like 76% said they like the flexibility of the hours.
Mhm.
And I know that partners will say that is really hard to do and work has to get done. I totally understand that. But if you give a little bit of flexibility, and again, not saying, it's crazy, this person's working this hours and this person's working completely different and there's no time to meet in the middle. But if there's that some give, then you give them a chance to really get involved with what's important to them and they feel supported in that. So I thought that was interesting that 76%. The other part, and I think this speaks so clearly to job embeddedness and job engagement, is respectful relationships with your colleagues and clients. And 76% said that was the aspect that they really liked. And so if you think about, community within a firm, if I'm working for a CPA firm, I'm working with colleagues, I'm working with clients. And if I have respectful relationships with those clients, and I know that my partners value those clients, and they're not gonna let those clients walk all over us or be mean to us, and that they expect you're gonna treat my employees with respect. I think that that's really important. And if I have respectful relationship with a client, not only will I feel more embedded in that, and when I left public accounting, I had some great clients, and that was a hard thing for me to leave. I mean, that was a sacrifice that I gave that up. But it also helps with job engagement because if it's a client that I have a lot of respect for, like I'm really going to get into their work, right? Like I'm going to be concentrated, I'm going to be dedicated, I'm going to be excited to work on it. And so those were the two firm aspects that had the highest, like, this is what we like about our firm. And then flexibility of work arrangements was the third one at 70%. And again, you have to figure out what works best for your firm and what you're doing. But is there something out there that is different than what you've done that might help? Change is not always a bad thing. And then, the fourth one was compensation and benefits. Compensation is always going to be an issue. I mean, that you can't, but just recognizing that it is there. So that was something that I really I liked being able to ask that question, and I liked seeing the responses that I got on that.
Cool. I'm glad you brought up all those last ones.
Yeah.
Those are definitely those are things I can see tangibly.
Right.
I can either implement or I can keep because we're seeing all these return to office and right all these things that are kind of closing that flexibility down.
Hmm.
But your sounds like your research definitely says on in accounting we should be keeping all of that.
And think about, again, every firm is different and every employee is different. So it has to be what works for not only the firm, but the employees. And maybe, again, if what you need to do for your firm maybe doesn't work for an employee, then maybe it really just isn't. That's not everyone's going to fit. Right. And so maybe that's part of it.
Excellent. Well, I think we that is some great advice for firm owners out there. Let me ask you to broaden that some more. Do you think there's any industry-wide implications or changes that you would advocate for based upon the research and what you found
Um, for accounting or public accounting
for
or
public
just
accounting?
for public accounting. I think that is that's an interesting question in this current time where we have, states are now looking at changing their 150-hour requirement. And so there's a lot going on with that. There's a lot to look at. I mean, the AICPA has put so much work in the past few years on increasing that pipeline, and has looked at the different barriers to people entering into the profession and obtaining their CPA license. And of course, one of the barriers is 150, where the states are taking that on right now. They changed the CPA exam to bring in maybe different people from different backgrounds. But one of the things that the AICPA has looked at is from culture, and culture is a broad term, but it is a big piece of it. And I think really trying to understand your employees, I think that that is crucial when we are looking at increasing the pipeline. And if you're a partner in a firm and you want to be able to leave, you want to have a succession plan, you have to know who those people are. And so really trying to understand what makes your employees want to stay with your firm and capitalizing on that. Maybe that takes more work than you've put in before, but I think it's crucial.
Excellent. Excellent. Just since we are talking about research, let me flip it the other way.
Okay.
Based upon your research, what other things do you think we need to research? Or do we need more research on, especially in public?
I think what I would really like to do is I would like to do this research, but in industry, because I didn't look at industry at all. I think that that would be really interesting to look at. I would like to take this research, but also do some qualitative research. So look at firms that have done things differently and how has that impacted their turnover? You know, firms that have said, hey, we'll be flexible, or hey, we're only doing this during busy season, or, you know, firms who've tried to do things a little bit differently. How has that worked as far as like embedding their employees and increasing their, you know, engagement? So I think that that would be really interesting.
Well, that's definitely our pre-discussion. I
Yeah.
already shared with you that that's something we're going to look at, and I won't give away the to the listeners. So, listeners, you got to keep paying attention to us because we
That's
actually
right.
are going to be taking Amy as well as a few others research in this area and expanding that this year. Amy, if anyone wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, you can email me at akcooper, Cooper, at alaska.edu. And I am also on LinkedIn. So happy to
Excellent.
connect that way.
Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast with me, and definitely some very meaningful research that we will expand this year.
Well, great. Thank you, Donnie. I appreciate it.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a framework for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply the innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out how the center resources can help you and your team members at www.improvetheworld.net. Thanks again, and I hope you join us for another Know-How Corner.